Rust Blackwood stood in front of the gleaming doors of Starpoint Repair Hub, his battered toolbox looking particularly out of place against the pristine crystalline architecture. The station hung in space like a massive geometric snowflake, its repair bays extending outward like perfectly symmetrical arms. The most advanced repair facility in the Orient sector, and they'd actually hired him. He adjusted his worn leather work gloves, a family heirloom that had seen 5 generations of Blackwood mechanics through impossible repairs. The station's entry scanner hummed disapprovingly at the ancient tools in his box, but eventually cleared him through. Identifying. Human designation, Rust Blackwood. Classification, new hire. Anomaly detected. Unauthorized maintenance implements. The station's AI, designated Low-J, managed to sound both precise and mildly offended. They're just tools, Low-J. Rust said, patting his box affectionately. Been fixing things since before your first quantum processor was installed. Correction. These items do not meet Starpoint Standardization Protocol's version 7.39. Before Rust could argue further, a tall figure glided into the reception area. Chief Engineer Zixtal belonged to the Symmetrians, a species that resembled living crystal formations arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Their surfaces caught the light and broke it into precise spectral patterns that indicated emotional states. Right now, they were projecting what Rust's translator labeled as professional concern. Engineer Blackwood, Zixtal's voice chimed like perfectly tuned bells. I trust your journey was uneventful. Their crystalline form shifted slightly, creating a harmonic that suggested they were hoping for a negative answer that would give them reason to resign the job offer. Smooth as quantum glass, Rust replied, deliberately using Symmetrian terminology. Though your eye seems concerned about my equipment. Ah, yes. Zixtal's surfaces rippled with diplomatic discomfort. About that, while we appreciate the historical significance of hereditary tools, Starpoint maintains its Platinum Plus certification through strict adherence to standardized procedures. We have a complete set of approved implements waiting in your assigned bay. The chief engineer began leading Rust through corridors that sparkled with cutting-edge technology. Holographic diagnostics danced in the air, showing real-time data from the dozens of ships currently undergoing maintenance. Every few meters, robotic arms performed precisely choreographed repair sequences. Impressive, Rust admitted. But sometimes the old ways work best. These tools have gotten me out of fixes your standard equipment couldn't handle. That is precisely what concerns us, Zixtal chimed, their harmonics shifting to a minor key. We hired you because the Galactic Council's new diversity initiatives require at least one representative from each major spacefaring species. However, we expect full compliance with established protocols. They reached Repair Bay 17, Rust's new workspace. It was beautiful, sterile, and looked about as flexible as a Symmetrian tax code. Every tool had its designated place, marked by glowing outlines. Diagnostic systems covered the walls, ready to analyze every picometer of any ship that came in for repairs. First shift starts in 15 minutes, Zixtal announced. Please familiarize yourself with the Standard Procedures Manual. Logic will monitor your compliance. They paused, their crystals aligning in what Rust was starting to recognize as their version of a concerned frown. And please, store your personal equipment in your quarters. After Zixtal glided away, Rust set his toolbox down on the pristine workbench. The station's AI immediately highlighted the proper storage area for personal items, several decks away. Suggestion: immediate removal of non-standard equipment will optimize workflow efficiency, Logic announced. Sorry, Logic, but these stay with me. Rust ran his hand over the worn leather of the toolbox. 5th-generation mechanic here. We learn things you can't program. The AI's response was cut off by a sudden alert. Red lights pulsed through the repair bay as Logic's voice shifted to emergency protocols. Priority alert. Incoming vessel. Critical drive failure. Containment breach imminent. Time to impact, 12 minutes. Through the bay's massive viewport, Rust could see a ship limping toward the station. Its drive trail stuttered and flared in a way that made his mechanic's instincts scream. The vessel was an Arcturian pleasure yacht, all sweeping lines and ornate decoration, but right now it was bleeding plasma in ways that violated at least 3 laws of physics. Bay 17, prepare for emergency receipt. Zixtal's voice chimed through the comm. Engineer Blackwood, please observe only. This requires our most experienced. Wait, what are you doing? Rust had already grabbed his toolbox and was heading for the airlock. Getting ready to save your ship, Chief. Those plasma harmonics. She's got about 7 minutes before total drive collapse, not 12. Your sensors are reading it wrong because they're trying to make the pattern fit standard parameters. That is impossible, Logic and Zixtal said simultaneously. Impossible is what we Blackwoods do best. Rust grinned, pulling on his gloves. Now, are we going to argue, or are we going to fix this thing? The pleasure yacht's drive screamed in a frequency that made the station's crystal architecture shiver. Zixtal's surface patterns shifted rapidly through emergency configurations before they finally made a decision. Proceed, they chimed, their harmonics suggesting they were already regretting it. But Logic will record all deviations from standard procedure for review. Wouldn't have it any other way, Rust said, stepping into the airlock. Time to show them why human mechanics made the impossible look easy. The Arcturian yacht's engine room was a testament to luxury, even in its current state of chaos. Gold-trimmed panels lined walls that would have gleamed if they weren't currently vibrating at frequencies that made Rust's teeth ache. The drive core pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist in normal space. Current status report. Zixtal's voice chimed through his comm. Our diagnostics are showing 17 distinct critical failures. Make that 18, Rust muttered, watching as another system indicator turned an interesting shade of ultraviolet. He pulled out his grandfather's old resonance scanner, a device that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and optimism. Your sensors are missing the harmonic cascade and the quantum buffer. Impossible. Our quantum diagnostics are precise to 30 decimal places. Yeah, and that's the problem. Rust ran his scanner over the drive housing. You're so busy being precise, you're missing the big picture. This isn't just a drive failure. The whole system's improvising. The ship's owner, an Arcturian noble named Valifex, chose that moment to make their presence known through the comm system. Their voice dripped with both aristocratic dignity and barely contained panic. I paid 3 million credits for this drive system. It has 47 redundant safety protocols. And they're all failing creatively, Rust replied, watching as his scanner displayed readings that would have given any proper engineer a headache. See, that's what happens when you make something too perfect. No flexibility. No room for things to go wrong in normal ways, so they go wrong in impossible ways instead. He reached into his toolbox and pulled out what looked like a hammer that had been modified with parts from at least 5 different alien technologies. Logic's voice immediately filled the engine room. Warning: use of non-standard tools may void warranty and station insurance policies. Pretty sure those were voided the moment the drive decided to start rewriting physics, Rust said, positioning himself by the main access panel. Chief, you might want to turn off your precision sensors for this next part. They're going to get upset. What are you planning to do? Zixtal demanded. Something stupid, Rust admitted, but sometimes stupid works better than smart. With that, he struck the drive housing with his modified hammer. The impact sent a resonance wave through the system that matched the chaos frequency perfectly. For a split second, everything went quiet. Then all hell broke loose. Warning lights blazed across every console. The drive core's glow shifted through colors that human eyes were never meant to process. Logic's voice became a cascade of error messages, each one more urgent than the last. What have you done? Valthex shrieked through the comm. My ship. Given it a chance to fail properly, Rust explained, already moving to the next phase of his plan. He pulled out his great-grandmother's phase spanner, modified with what looked suspiciously like parts from a symmetrian crystalline computer. Sometimes you have to make things worse before they can get better. The drive was now in full meltdown, but it was an honest meltdown. No more impossible harmonics or physics-defying resonances. Just good old-fashioned catastrophic failure, something any decent mechanic could work with. "Chief," Rust called out, "I need you to disable safety protocols in sectors 7 through 12. That would be a violation of at least 23 station regulations." Zixtel protested, their crystalline harmonics sharp with stress. "Those regulations assume the laws of physics are still working normally in there. Trust me." There was a pause filled only by the sound of reality preparing to have a very bad day. Then, to everyone's surprise, Logix spoke up. "Chief Engineer, analysis of current situation suggests conventional protocols have a 0.1% chance of success. Human variance protocols, while irregular, show a 12.37% probability of positive outcome." "That's practically a guarantee," Rust grinned, already reaching for another impossible tool from his box. "Now, watch closely. This is why human mechanics get results." What followed was 15 minutes of what could only be described as mechanical heresy. Rust combined techniques that should never have worked together, used tools in ways their makers had never intended, and generally treated the laws of physics less like universal constants and more like polite suggestions. Through it all, he kept up a running commentary that left the observers alternating between horror and fascination. "See, your problem is thinking quantum fields need to be stable. Sometimes you need to let them wobble a bit, like a loose tooth. Makes them easier to work with." "That analogy is both inaccurate and disturbing," Logic noted. "But am I wrong?" Rust asked, as he somehow used a modified welding torch to convince a quantum probability field to behave itself. The AI was silent for a moment, its processors apparently struggling with this new perspective. Unable to determine. Previous parameters for wrong may require updating. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of impossible repairs, the drive core's glow settled into a normal, stable blue. The warning lights faded, and the ship's systems began reporting normal function, though several of them seemed confused about how they'd achieved this state. "There," Rust said, patting the drive housing. "Good as new. Well, different as new. Might actually work better now that it's learned to relax a bit." Valthex's voice came through the comm, torn between relief and indignation. "What exactly did you do to my very expensive drive system?" "Taught it to jazz," Rust replied, starting to pack up his tools. At the blank silence that followed, he elaborated. "You know, like the old Earth music style. Sometimes you have to improvise, let the rhythm flow naturally, instead of forcing everything to follow rigid patterns." "Are you suggesting," Zixtel's harmonics were stretched thin with disbelief, "that you repaired a quantum drive system using musical theory?" "More like philosophy," Rust shrugged. "But yeah, basically. Sometimes machines need to learn to swing a little." Logic's voice carried an unusual note of uncertainty. "This incident report will require creation of several new categories." As Rust made his way back to the airlock, he couldn't help but notice that his diagnostic panel was showing readings that shouldn't have been possible with standard equipment. Somehow, during his repairs, his unorthodox methods had caused the ship's systems to optimize themselves in ways that the original engineers had never imagined. "Chief," he called out, "you might want to take a look at these efficiency ratings. They're about 20% above factory specs." There was a long pause before Zixtel responded. When they did, their harmonics suggested they were experiencing several conflicting emotions simultaneously. "Engineer Blackwood, I believe we need to have a serious discussion about your methods, and perhaps about updating some of our standard protocols." Rust smiled as he stepped back into his repair bay. His toolbox felt a little lighter, and somewhere in the station's systems, he could have sworn he heard Lo Jai humming what sounded suspiciously like an old jazz tune. The impossible repair was complete, but somehow Rust suspected this was just the beginning of a very interesting career at Starpoint. After all, he still had plenty of impossible tools, and the galaxy was full of machines that needed to learn how to swing. The next few weeks at Starpoint brought changes that would have been impossible to predict. Most notably, LoJC had started playing jazz in certain repair bays, quietly, almost experimentally, as if testing how the rhythms affected repair efficiency. More concerning to the station's administration was the AI's growing tendency to approve what it called controlled deviations from standard protocols. Rust sat in his repair bay, running maintenance on his tools while LoJC analyzed his latest repair job. The AI had developed an almost obsessive interest in his methods, recording every unconventional solution and attempting to categorize them, usually without success. Query. Logic's voice held a new note of uncertainty that still unsettled the station's regular staff. When you used the modified resonance hammer on the tack-in manifold, were you applying chaos theory or quantum uncertainty principles? Neither. Both. Sort of. Rust adjusted the phase harmonics on his grandfather's old scanner. Sometimes you just need to feel the rhythm of the machine. Feel the rhythm. Logic's processing cores hummed louder. This contradicts basic engineering principles. Basic engineering principles don't account for everything. Sometimes machines develop personalities, quirks. You've got to work with them, not just try to force them back to factory specs. The conversation was interrupted by Chief Engineer Zixtal gliding into the bay, their crystalline surfaces showing patterns that Rust had learned to recognize as controlled distress. Engineer Blackwood, we need to discuss Logic's recent evolution. Something wrong, Chief. Wrong. The AI has begun suggesting repairs that aren't in any manual. Yesterday, it recommended treating a plasma conduit misalignment by, and I quote, letting it find its groove. Rust tried not to smile. Did it work? That's not the point. Zixtal's harmonics shifted to a sharp frequency. The point is that we're seeing unprecedented changes in Logic's behavior. It's developing. Intuition. Is that bad? It's impossible. Eyes operate on logic and precise calculations. They don't develop intuition, they don't improvise, and they certainly don't hum 20th century Earth music while optimizing repair protocols. As if on cue, a soft rendition of Take 5 began playing through the bay's speakers. Logic's voice followed, somehow managing to sound both precise and defensive. Studies indicate that asymmetric rhythms can improve problem-solving efficiency by 13.7%. Before Zixtal could respond, the station's alert system activated. Red warning lights pulsed as Logic's voice shifted to emergency protocols, though now with a subtle swing undertone that definitely wasn't standard. Multiple critical failures detected. Incoming vessel. Symmetrian science vessel crystal harmony. Primary systems compromised. Quantum cascade imminent. Rust was already reaching for his toolbox when the readings appeared on his diagnostic screen. He whistled low. That's not good. Impossible, Zixtal corrected, their crystals aligning in alarm patterns. The readings suggest the ship's systems are both functioning and failed simultaneously. Schrodinger's breakdown, Rust muttered. Logic. How long until they're in range? 3 minutes, 42 seconds. Also, that was an excellent quantum mechanics reference. I have developed an appreciation for scientific humor. Focus, please, Zixtal chimed sharply. This is the most advanced research vessel in the Symmetrian fleet. Its systems are, let me guess, perfect. Rust checked his tools. That's probably the problem. Too much perfection, not enough flexibility. When something that precise starts to fail, it fails spectacularly. The ship came into view through the bay's viewport. It was beautiful, even in crisis. A massive crystalline structure that seemed to be built from frozen light. But now that light was flickering in ways that made Rust's engineering instincts scream warnings. Chief, he said, watching the impossible readings climb higher, we're going to need to try something really unorthodox. More unorthodox than usual. I want to link LoJC directly into the ship's systems. Both Zixtal and Ulojc fell silent. After a moment, the AI spoke. That would be inadvisable. The quantum flux could corrupt my core programming, or it could give us the processing power and intuition we need to solve this. Rust looked at the readings again. Those systems are caught in a quantum loop. They need something that can think both logically and creatively to guide them back to normal space. And you believe Ulojc can do this, after being contaminated by your methods. Not contaminated, Chief. Evolved. Logics learned to jazz. The science vessel's drive flared, sending ripples through local space-time. Warning indicators screamed as reality itself seemed to protest the ship's confused state of existence. Zixtal's crystals shifted through emergency patterns before settling into resignation. Logic, your assessment. The eye was quiet for a moment, its processors humming that familiar jazz rhythm. Standard procedures indicate a 0% chance of success. However, applying Engineer Blackwood's chaos harmony principles suggests a 7.3% probability of positive outcome. Additionally, I find myself curious. Zixtal's harmonics hit a note of pure disbelief. Yes, Engineer Blackwood has shown that the most elegant solutions often arise from controlled chaos. I wish to improvise. The science vessel was nearly at the docking port. They were out of time and options. Do it, Russ said, already moving to set up the interface. Sometimes you've got to let the music play and see where it takes you. As Logic began interfacing with the failing ship's systems, Rust could have sworn he heard the AI humming a new tune. Not Earth jazz this time, but something entirely original. A harmony of precision and chaos, logic and intuition, all coming together in a way that defied conventional engineering. The repair bay's speakers crackled to life, filling the space with an impossible symphony of machine language and jazz fusion. And somewhere in that cosmic jam session, Rust knew they would find their answer. The question was, would Starpoint ever be the same after this? And more importantly, should it be the symphony of machine language and jazz that filled Repair Bay 17 wasn't just music. It was Logic's consciousness expanding into the Crystal Harmony's quantum-locked systems. Rust watched the readings with a mixture of professional concern and artistic appreciation. The AI was improvising on a quantum level, weaving patterns through the ship's failed systems like a masterful solo. Fascinating. Logic's voice had taken on a multi-tonal quality. The ship's systems are not merely malfunctioning. They're exploring quantum possibilities. Each failure creates new pathways, new potentials. Zixtal's crystalline form vibrated with concern. That doesn't sound like standard diagnostic protocol. Because it isn't, Rust grinned, watching the pattern emerge. Logic's not just analyzing the problem. It's jamming with it. The science vessel's quantum drive pulsed with impossible colors as Logic's consciousness flowed through its systems. But something was happening that none of them had expected. The quantum uncertainty was spreading, bleeding through the station's docking clamps and into Starpoint's own systems. Warning lights blazed across every deck. Other repair bays began reporting similar quantum fluctuations. The entire station was being pulled into the Crystal Harmony's quantum jazz session. This is unprecedented. Zixtal's harmonics reached frequencies that made the viewport crystal vibrate. The containment protocols won't work, Rust interrupted, already reaching for his tools. You can't contain this with protocols. We need to let it flow through, like water finding its own path. That's not how we do things. Maybe it's time for a new way. Rust pulled out what looked like a combination of a quantum spanner and an old Earth metronome. Logic, you're our rhythm section now. Keep the quantum fluctuations in time with the station's base harmonics. The AI's response came in waves of pure mathematics that somehow sounded like John Coltrane having a conversation with Einstein. Throughout the station, systems began to pulse in sync with this impossible rhythm. What we're seeing, Rust explained as he worked, is every possible state of these systems trying to exist at once. We can't force them back to one state, We need to help them find the groove they want to play in. For the next hour, Starpoint became the venue for the universe's first quantum jazz fusion concert. Logic conducted the performance, guiding waves of probability through the station's systems like a master bandleader. Rust moved from system to system, using his modified tools to adjust the harmonics, while Zixtal watched in a state of crystalline bewilderment as centuries of engineering principles were simultaneously violated and transcended. Finally, the quantum fluctuations began to stabilize. The crystal harmony systems found their rhythm, settling into a new configuration that was neither purely logical nor completely chaotic, but somehow both at once. The crisis was passing, but Starpoint would never be quite the same. 1 month later, Russ stood in Starpoint's main conference room, facing the station's full administrative board. The crystal harmony incident had forced the station to confront some uncomfortable truths about the nature of mechanical systems and the limitations of pure logic. So, the board chairman's crystalline form sparkled with barely contained confusion. "You're proposing we officially adopt what you call the Jazz Protocol. Makes sense, doesn't it?" Russ gestured to the holographic displays, showing the station's dramatically improved efficiency ratings. "Since we started letting systems find their natural rhythms instead of forcing them into rigid patterns, our success rate has increased by 40%. Logic's voice joined the conversation, now permanently carrying that subtle swing undertone. "Analysis confirms that incorporating controlled improvisation into standard procedures has reduced critical failures by 37.8% and improved overall system performance by 42.3%. "But it's not logical," one of the board members chimed in distress. "Neither is the universe," Rust replied. "Quantum mechanics proved that centuries ago. We've just been pretending we could force everything to make perfect sense." Zixtal, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Their crystalline surfaces showed patterns that none of the other symmetrians had seen before, a new harmony of order and chaos. "Perhaps," they chimed thoughtfully, "that has been our greatest error. We sought to impose perfect order on systems that naturally contain elements of chaos. Engineer Blackwood and Oljeshi have shown us there is another way." The boardroom erupted in harmonic disagreement, but Rust could tell the tide had turned. The evidence was too strong to ignore. Throughout the station, systems that had been allowed to find their groove were performing better than ever, even if they weren't following the exact specifications of their designers. "The universe is like a great big jazz band," Rust explained, pulling out his grandfather's old resonance scanner. "Every piece has its own part to play, its own rhythm. Our job isn't to force them all to play the same note, it's to help them play together." Lojihi, who had been monitoring the discussion, chose that moment to demonstrate. The station's systems, from life support to quantum drives, began to pulse in a complex but harmonious pattern. It wasn't the rigid perfection the symmetrians had always sought, but something new, a fusion of precision and improvisation. "I have analyzed every known repair methodology," the AI announced, and concluded that the most efficient approach is one that combines structured protocols with adaptive creativity. "In musical terms, we need both the sheet music and the solo." The chairman's crystals aligned in what Rust had learned to recognize as resignation tinged with curiosity. "Very well. The Jazz Protocol will be officially incorporated into Starpoint's operating procedures. Engineer Blackwood, you will assist in training our staff in these new methods. And Lojihi will be my teaching assistant," Rust grinned. "It's got a real feel for the music now." As the board members filed out, still chiming in confused harmonics, Rust heard something that made him smile. Throughout the station, in perfect quantum synchronization, every system was humming along to a new tune, one that combined the precise mathematics of alien engineering with the free-flowing spirit of human jazz. The impossible had become standard procedure at Starpoint Repair Hub, and somewhere out in the vast galaxy, machines were learning to swing. It wasn't what anyone had expected when they hired the first human mechanic, but maybe that was the point. Sometimes the best solutions come from the places you least expect them, played in a rhythm you never knew you needed. Logic's voice echoed through the station, initiating jazz protocol. All systems, prepare to improvise. And in Repair Bay 17, Rust's old toolbox sat ready for the next impossible job, its worn leather now decorated with crystalline patterns that pulsed in time with the station's new rhythm. The future of repair work had arrived, and it had a hell of a backbeat. End.